America is a nation defined by its control over water, with nearly 92,000 dams scattered across its landscape. These structures hold back rivers and reservoirs that supply cities, irrigate farms, and generate electricity. Yet the average age of these dams is over 60 years, and thousands are classified as high hazard, meaning that if they fail, the consequences would be catastrophic. Imagine for a moment that in a single instant, every one of these dams collapsed simultaneously. In the west, the Hoover Dam on the Colorado River, a 6.6 million ton concrete wedge holding back Lake Mead, but disintegrates. A colossal wall of water surges through Black Canyon, obliterating Laughlin and Bullhead City within minutes. Downstream Davis and Parker dams are instantly overwhelmed, the waves carving a new path through the desert toward Yuma, Arizona. Across Arizona and Nevada, cities reliant on this water supply are cut off and millions are trapped in the chaos. In California, the Oroville Dam, the tallest in the United States at 770 feet, fails. Lake Oroville pours down the Feather River Valley as a 30-foot high, highway speed wall of water. Oroville, Yuba City, and Marysville are submerged in minutes. The Sacramento River Delta is devastated. The Central Valley, a crucial agricultural hub, transformed into a turbulent inland sea. Crops are destroyed, irrigation systems obliterated, and homes and infrastructure swept away. The Pacific Northwest faces a similar nightmare. Grand Coulee Dam on the Columbia River disappears, releasing the contents of Franklin D. Roosevelt Lake. The resulting flood sweeps toward Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington, obliterating riverside communities and tearing through bridges, roads, and power lines. Across the Midwest, the Missouri River's massive dams, including Fort Peck in Montana, fail in succession. The river becomes an unstoppable battering ram, inundating Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri. Kansas City and St. Louis are hit with waves capable of erasing entire neighborhoods. The Mississippi River, already swollen, cannot contain the surge, compounding the destruction. In the east, thousands of older dams in densely populated areas collapse. The Tennessee Valley Authority's network of 29 hydroelectric dams becomes a chain of destruction. In Pennsylvania, New York, and New England, smaller mill dams unleash torrents that wipe out towns and reshape valleys. Within the first hour, millions of lives are lost. Entire cities are underwater, and the continent is violently transformed. The sheer scale of devastation is unlike anything in human history, and for the survivors, the nightmare has only just begun. As the floodwaters carve new paths across the continent, a second catastrophe begins, this one not made of water, but of the systems that depend on it. The United States power grid, already strained by the sudden loss of hydroelectric dams, begins to fail on a massive scale. Hydroelectric's capacity vanishes instantly, eliminating roughly 6 to 7% of the nation's electricity generation. Automated safety systems struggle to compensate, but the imbalance is too great. Within hours, entire regions are plunged into darkness, and without power, basic services grind to a halt. The loss of rivers and reservoirs creates an immediate crisis for nuclear power plants. Over 90 reactors across the country rely on continuous water flow for cooling. Emergency diesel generators engage, but without sufficient water, the pumps only circulate air and debris. Temperatures inside reactor cores begin to rise, creating the potential for meltdowns. Plants like Browns Ferry in Alabama, Cooper in Nebraska, and Palo Verde in Arizona face an unprecedented risk. In some areas, radioactive contamination begins to spread, compounding the human and environmental toll. Transportation infrastructure collapses under the weight of the catastrophe. Bridges and highways are destroyed or submerged, leaving railways twisted and unusable. Ports and shipping channels are blocked by debris from broken dams and eroded riverbanks. Food, fuel, and medical supplies cannot move, isolating communities across the country. Urban centers, already flooded or cut off, descend into chaos. Communication networks falter as well. Without power, cellular towers, data centers, and internet infrastructure fail. Emergency broadcast systems are overwhelmed, leaving citizens in the dark, not only about their surroundings, but also about official instructions or evacuation routes. Social media becomes a patchwork of fragmented reports, rumors, and pleas for help, but connectivity is inconsistent at best. Government and emergency response efforts are paralyzed. FEMA and the National Guard struggle to coordinate relief when every state is simultaneously affected. There are no safe zones to stage operations from, no intact supply lines, and no secure transportation corridors. Decisions that normally take hours must now be made in minutes, with lives hanging in the balance. By the end of the first 24 hours, America has transformed into a continent of isolated survivors. Water is gone, power is out, and communication is fractured. The immediate struggle for survival is over for some, but the long, grim fight for existence is only beginning. Millions are displaced, and the infrastructure that once held the nation together has been erased, leaving a landscape of devastation and uncertainty. Weeks turn into months, and the initial wall of water has long since moved inland, leaving a country unrecognizable. Entire river valleys have been carved anew, sediment and debris reshaping landscapes. Cities that were once vibrant hubs lie in ruins, submerged streets now replaced by mud, wreckage, and stagnant pools. Survivors face a harsh new reality. The infrastructure that supported life, power, sanitation, transport, and communication is gone, and with it the normal rhythms of society. Thirst becomes a daily struggle. The floodwaters themselves are undrinkable, contaminated with industrial chemicals, sewage, and heavy metals released from destroyed dams and water treatment facilities. Communities scavenge whatever remains. Rainwater collected from rooftops, abandoned swimming pools, or any small reservoirs that survived. Cholera, dysentery, and other waterborne diseases spread rapidly, turning makeshift camps into centers of illness. Mortality rates soar, particularly among children, the elderly, and the immunocompromised. Food shortages compound the crisis. With farmland flooded, machinery destroyed, and irrigation systems obliterated, crops cannot be planted or harvested. The Midwest's grain belt, California's Central Valley, and the Mississippi Delta, all once breadbaskets, are largely unusable. Supply chains are paralyzed, making imported or stored food difficult to access. Starvation becomes a central threat, forcing mass migration as survivors follow rivers and coastlines in search of whatever edible resources remain. The social fabric phrase. Law enforcement is stretched thin, and local authorities are often powerless. Armed groups and militias emerge, controlling small caches of resources, particularly clean water. Communities become fortified enclaves where access to essentials is dictated by strength rather than law. Tribalism and barter replace governance, and conflict over territory and supplies escalates. Survival rather than cooperation becomes the primary rule of life. Environmental destruction continues. Deforested slopes destabilized by flood erosion trigger landslides, blocking rivers and burying towns. Toxic sediment settles in former lakes and reservoirs, poisoning soils and altering ecosystems. Fish and wildlife populations collapse, further disrupting the delicate balance that once supported human sustenance. The landscape itself is in constant flux, unpredictable and hostile. By the end of the first year, the United States is fundamentally altered. The scale of human displacement, disease, starvation, and environmental collapse has created a continent where the majority of people live in constant struggle. Cities are ghostly remnants, transportation is unreliable or impossible, and a new harsh form of social order based on survival and resource control has taken hold. The once interconnected nation now exists as isolated pockets of humanity, clinging to life in a radically transformed and unforgiving landscape. 2 decades after the simultaneous collapse of every dam in America, the nation is unrecognizable. Entire river systems have been permanently rerouted, valleys carved deeper, and floodplains transformed into chaotic wetlands or barren plains. The once productive agricultural heartlands remain largely unusable, forcing communities to adapt with small-scale subsistence farming along the edges of surviving arable land. Forests have reclaimed many abandoned urban and rural areas, but the regrowth is patchy, often interspersed with toxic sediment deposits left from the floods. Survivors live in decentralized, self-sufficient communities. Large cities are relics, their skyscrapers slowly collapsing into the mud, and only the coastal areas with operational desalination plants have maintained any semblance of organized governance. These fortified city-states ration water with precision, enforce strict population controls, and employ heavily armed patrols to prevent raids. Even with these measures, life is precarious. Every day is a battle against the elements and resource scarcity. Technology has regressed. Steam power, wood-fired engines, and windmills replace electricity in many settlements. Communications are mostly analog, Relying on radio transmissions and courier networks, knowledge is treasured, particularly agricultural manuals, engineering guides, and medical texts, as communities attempt to rebuild sustainable systems without modern infrastructure. Education is localized, and literacy becomes a crucial survival skill, passed down selectively within families or trusted groups. The environmental consequences are ongoing. Radioactive contamination from the nuclear plants that failed in the immediate aftermath has created exclusion zones in parts of the Southeast and Midwest. Wildlife has adapted in strange ways, with some species thriving in flooded regions, while others have disappeared entirely. Rivers, though altered, support pockets of fish and other aquatic life, but the ecosystems are fragile and highly sensitive to human activity. Cultural memory has shifted. Stories of the old America, with flowing rivers, green pastures, and plentiful water, are passed down as myths. Water is no longer taken for granted. It defines status, power, and survival. Art, music, and storytelling revolve around the scarcity and preciousness of water, commemorating the catastrophe that reshaped the continent. Despite the devastation, human resilience endures. Communities trade, form alliances, and slowly rebuild. New social structures emerge based on local resources, cooperative survival, and the protection of life-giving water sources. The continent remains dangerous and unpredictable, but life persists, shaped and hardened by 20 years of relentless struggle. As the decades pass, the landscape of America continues to evolve under the shadow of the Great Collapse. The river valleys carved by the catastrophic floods have settled into new, unpredictable courses, and many formerly fertile plains remain permanently waterlogged or covered in sediment and debris. Seasonal flooding is now a constant threat, with small communities having to relocate every few years to higher ground. Former agricultural centers have transformed into marshlands or wastelands, forcing survivors to adapt with localized food production, aquaculture in newly formed wetlands, and carefully rationed foraging. The population remains sparse and highly fragmented. Communities rely on fortified enclaves near remaining freshwater sources or coastal desalination plants, which are carefully defended against raiders. Travel between settlements is perilous. The old interstate system is largely destroyed, with only crude, hand-cleared paths and rivers used as makeshift transport routes. Caravans must navigate through unpredictable terrain, dealing with natural hazards and hostile groups that control critical resources. Economic and social systems are entirely decentralized. Barter has replaced currency, with water, food, and fuel serving as the primary forms of trade. Communities that manage to cultivate medicinal plants, repair old machinery, or harness renewable energy gain significant influence over their neighbors. Knowledge of survival skills, water purification techniques, and environmental stewardship has become the most valuable currency, passed carefully from one generation to the next. The ecological consequences of the collapse remain profound. Forests and wetlands have begun to reclaim abandoned farmland and urban areas, but toxic sediment from destroyed dams continues to pollute soil and water. Many species of fish and wildlife have adapted to the new conditions, while others have vanished entirely. The environmental balance is fragile, and small mistakes such as overfishing or mismanaged irrigation can have catastrophic ripple effects across local ecosystems. Technology has been adapted for a low-resource world. Steam engines, wind turbines, and small-scale solar setups power critical infrastructure, while old knowledge from engineering, medicine, and agriculture guides reconstruction efforts. Communities are inventive, using salvaged materials to build water storage systems, irrigation channels, and protective barriers against seasonal floods. Cultural memory is both a guide and a warning. Stories of the lost cities, the power of the dams, and the floods themselves are told as cautionary tales. Rituals and festivals often center on water, celebrating survival and commemorating the ancestors who endured the initial collapse. Education focuses on practical survival, resource management, and preserving knowledge of the old world, ensuring that each new generation can navigate a continent forever changed by the simultaneous failure of nearly 92,000 dams. Centuries after the simultaneous collapse of every dam in America, the continent has been reshaped almost beyond recognition. The old nation exists now only in memory, recorded in tattered books and the oral histories of scattered communities. Former coastlines have been redrawn by silt and sediment, river courses permanently altered by the violent surges of water, and vast inland seas have replaced fertile valleys. Many regions once dense with human settlement are now forests, marshes, or barren plains, where wildlife has either adapted or vanished entirely. The remnants of humanity live in isolated, self-sufficient communities. Knowledge of agriculture, water management, and basic engineering is the lifeblood of society. Wells, cisterns, and carefully maintained springs are fiercely protected, and water scarcity dictates almost every aspect of life. Children grow up learning to read weather patterns, predict floods, and purify water. Ensuring the survival of each enclave, civilization has reverted to a decentralized agrarian state, yet it is a world rich with ingenuity and resilience. Despite the hardship, ecosystems are recovering in unexpected ways. Wetlands formed by breached dams have become havens for birds and fish, while forests reclaim abandoned towns. Predatory and herbivorous species flourish in the absence of human encroachment. Some areas, however, remain permanently uninhabitable due to lingering toxic sediments and the aftermath of nuclear and industrial disasters triggered in the collapse. Humans must navigate around these dead zones using knowledge of the terrain and resource distribution to survive. Trade and communication are slow but crucial. Caravans transport food, water, and tools between communities, and alliances are formed based on mutual survival rather than political borders. Festivals and storytelling keep cultural identity alive, commemorating the time before the dams and teaching lessons about the fragility of human control over nature. Water is no longer taken for granted. It is revered, rationed, and embedded into every aspect of society. The collapse serves as a permanent reminder of humanity's dependence on infrastructure. Once symbols of engineering prowess, the dams are now ghostly relics, their ruins monuments to both ingenuity and hubris. The simultaneous failure of nearly 92,000 dams did not just destroy cities and kill millions, it rewrote the rules of life on the continent. Humanity survived, but the Earth they inherited is a planet governed by water itself. In the end, the story of America's dams is both a warning and a testament. It shows how civilization can be built and lost in the blink of an eye, and how survival depends on adaptability, knowledge, and respect for the forces of nature. Though the continent is unrecognizable, life persists in the quiet forests along the reclaimed rivers, and within the fortified enclaves, humans continue to endure, a resilient species forever shaped by the great water that once defined and then destroyed their world.